All right, so we're going to call our meeting to order for the Freeport Sustainability Advisory Board. First thing on the agenda is to approve the minutes from last meeting, 2 weeks ago. Anybody have a motion? Motion to approve the minutes? All in favor? Second. All in favor? All of us. Okay. And now we're going to open it to public comment on the draft climate action plan. So anybody who would like to speak from the public, you're invited to come up to the podium, please, to speak so that it can be recorded on the mic. Anybody?
Don't be bashful. Flip a coin.
I'd like to say something, but Alex, you want to go first? You go to exactly
Yeah, you do have to go up to the mic because it's being streamed so that they can hear you.
Yeah, my name is Bill Rickson. I live on Varney Road, which is about a mile south of here. Been a resident of Freeport for more than 40 years. And looking at this draft climate action plan, it's all wonderful, and it's amazing all the work that's been put into it by all of the people in town. Most of it volunteer work, which is pretty amazing. One thing that I see missing in it, I mean, even if everything we do in town as far as reducing their carbon footprint for all these different manners, that's all wonderful, but fossil fuels are going to continue to be used elsewhere and throughout the world, and I think we need to make some recognition that that is a huge problem, and no matter what all of the wonderful things we can do here in town, climate change is still a devastating reality. And so in no way do I want to dismiss our plan. It's a wonderful thing, and it's great that we're taking our responsibility with this issue. Several weeks ago, the Maine State Legislature passed a resolution in support of the fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty, which is something that is really needed for people to recognize that fossil fuels are a continuing problem. And obviously, I'm not that articulate in stating the needs for it, but Senator Stacey Brenner from Scarborough, I just want to read quickly what she had said introducing this in the Senate. It passed in the House like a few days before that. This is back in early January. And then it went to the Senate, and these are Stacey Brenner's words. We find ourselves in a pivotal moment in history where the choices we make today will determine the future of our environment and the quality of life for all living beings. The Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Agreement represents a groundbreaking initiative aimed at addressing the urgent need to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels. Fossil fuels have undeniably powered our progress and our economic growth, but the environmental costs have been staggering. Climate change, the degradation of ecosystems, and extreme weather events like the last 3 historic storms that resulted in devastating flooding events in Maine are all consequences of our reliance on these finite resources. The Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Agreement recognizes the severity of this challenge and seeks to forge a path forward toward a sustainable and cleaner energy future. It is a commitment to the health of the planet and the health of its inhabitants. This was Senator Stacey Brenner in her introductory remarks. The voting continued in the Senate, passed it also. So that has the state of Maine has made that commitment to this treaty. This fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty is based on several other successful non-proliferation agreements that the world community has agreed upon. First of all, back in the 1980s, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty was, all nations recognized that as something that was definitely necessary, and it was passed. Most of you are probably old enough to remember the ozone problem back about, I don't know, I think it was in the 70s, or maybe it was in the 80s, I can't remember the exact date. But the world community recognized that our use of ozone was destroying the habitability of the planet, and people acted. Landmines were acted upon by the international community also. So there is a precedent for a treaty like this. I would urge you, the Sustainability Committee, to look at this and have our town council look at it, and hopefully they can join in a resolution in support of this treaty. So I think it's important that in our climate action plan that there be some mention of this. Do you mention that this fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty is being considered? Several nations, several governmental organizations throughout the country have supported it, and that this is in the works, and this is something that is needed. Because as we all know, the fossil fuel industry, the banks and corporations have profited immensely by the use of fossil fuels over the last 50 years. All the time, we all know this, that the fossil fuel industry and the banks and many corporations have joined in with denying the reality of the science. We know this. We know that their own, Exxon's own scientists told them in 1979. I mean, we've seen the emails. It's all this is on the record. And instead of the fossil fuel industry and Exxon, which is the head of it all, instead of them stepping forward and sharing that information and working towards humankind trying to resolve the situation, they sat on it, denied the science, put untold amounts of money into denying that science and to buying politicians who would do their bidding. We know this, and this is something that needs to be talked about. And so our climate plan should mention, the stranglehold that fossil fuel industry has on our economy and on our politics. So there needs to be some mention, because otherwise I think that people in town, some people, hopefully none of us here in this room, but some people are going to think, oh, Freeport's doing a wonderful job to lower our carbon footprint. We're doing everything that needs to be done. And so they can sit back and with a sense of security that they don't have to do anything else. That they can say they can contribute to this and they can abide by it and support it, and then they have this false sense of security that everything's going to be all right, and it's not. It's not going to be all right. I'm old enough to remember, and I think Bob and probably others, that back in the late 50s, when I was in first grade, it was 1952, I can remember doing duck and cover drills. In the first grade, we were told to hide go out under our desks and sometimes out in the hall, and we'd kneel down in front of our lockers with our hands over our head, as if that was going to somehow save us from a nuclear blast. Just incredible. And I lived 12 miles north of Boston. Boston would have been one of the cities that would have been bombed. It's just insane. And also in the 50s and early 60s, there was this time of fallout shelters. Everyone was encouraged to dig fallout shelters in their backyard or in their basement. And I can remember thinking, like when I was in elementary school, thinking, oh, I could go down in the basement of the house, and I go to the southeast corner of our basement, because Boston was only 12 miles away, and my family would survive this nuclear attack. Just crazy. John Kennedy recognized that people were going to have a false sense of security, if everyone built bomb shelters, everyone would think that they could survive a nuclear attack. And nuclear war would be something that was survivable, and so it was an option. But Kennedy recognized that that was insane. And so he stopped that. He stopped that whole fallout shelter craze that was going on back in the 50s and early 60s. So anyway, that's what I mentioned that just because I think this draft climate action plan can give people in town a false sense of security. We need to mention what's going on with fossil fuels and the fossil fuel industry and the banks that control our politics. And there needs to be some mention. I would hope that perhaps you could mention in it that the state of Maine has endorsed the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. There should be some mention of that. That's an official document that our legislature has passed. I have a copy of Stacey Brennan's comments. I also have a Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty thing that came in off of fossilfueltreaty.org that I hope that you could look over and consider including it somehow in this document. There should be some mention. I hope to say that this is a wonderful thing that we're doing in the town, but it's only a small step with what all of us citizens of town need to, we need to be focused on the fact that fossil fuels need to come to a rapid end. We need to have a rapid and just transition. And that's what this treaty does. This treaty looks at making a rapid and fair and just transition. So no worker, no community, no one's left behind. Everyone's considered. And it's not just a few who profit, but I mean, I think it's a sane thing for us to consider. So thank you for listening to me go on and rant, but I feel powerfully that this should be included in this statement. Because otherwise, I mean, there's sense that we have to self-censor ourselves and not mention the word fossil fuels. You know, in the Paris Agreement back in 2015, there was no mention of fossil fuels. That's the stranglehold the fossil fuel industry has on our politics. I mean, it was really like pulling, it was incredible to get the fact that the COP was back just last fall, the agreement that Susanna was at, that it was really difficult to get the word fossil fuel mentioned. It's incredible. In the Paris Agreement, there was no mention of gas or coal or nothing. That's the stranglehold they have. So, and you know, we're supposed to self-censor ourselves and not say anything about fossil fuels. We're not supposed to mention it's a problem. It's insane. So I think that we need to say something. And this document should say it. It should say that we're doing a great thing as a town, but it's only a beginning, and that we all have to be active in confronting the fossil fuel industry and the banks who are financing all of this. You know, this needs to be done. So anyway, thank you, and can I give this to somebody?
Yes, please, yeah.
And make copies, and hope that you could all take a look at.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much, Bill. Anybody like to speak? Susanna?
Yeah, thank you very much, Bill. Indeed, yeah, at Dubai, we were debating the conversation about are fossil fuels the problem, which was not the conversation that many of us wanted to have there. I know I suggested at some point in the past year about endorsing this, and just wondered about getting that. We have endorsed some other legislation or resolutions in the past that have been at the national level. This one, 12, I believe the current thing, 12 governments, states, countries around the world have endorsed this, and I believe it's 103 subnational governments, ranging from Portland, that I got to help pass last August, to Austin to Los Angeles. State of California also recently endorsed it, and I think it would be a great thing for us to do. I don't know how many right now, but I endorsed it as a researcher when it launched 2.5 years ago or so, and it now has, several thousand people around the world who have signed on to it. So it's, they're looking for basically strength in numbers right now. Subnational governments, states, towns, cities, and regions of the world, as well as countries. And it will be gaining hopefully some strength, and then having a coalition discussion next year. So I'd like to just re-up that.
Kristen?
I missed the very beginning of your statement. Didn't you go before town council and request that they endorse it?
Yeah, about
And
several months ago, I went and spoke before the town council and told them that you were, as a board, were considering it and would be sometime in the future coming to them with a recommendation. And I told them about the treaty and such.
Okay. I couldn't remember.
And that's
where
what we've
that
done
landed.
before. Instead of going straight to town council, we've come to town council as a board.
I have a comment.
Yes.
I think Bill has made, well, the case is great. What he's saying has to be done, has to be done. I see it actually tying to our climate action plan in a way, because we've set a rather ambitious goals for going electric, basically, electric vehicles, goals of being able to make changes in the way heat and electricity are provided in buildings. And I don't think we can actually achieve those goals without at the same time something happening nationally, worldwide, to cut down the emissions, the production of fossil fuels. So I almost see it as it's a good idea separately, but I think it actually ties with what we're trying to get done, and we won't actually get it done without that happening.
I think it's also important to note that it's not just energy that the fossil fuels are being used for. So we have stuff in our climate action plan about the plastics, and Maine, was first in the extended producer responsibility bill. So it's not just renewable energy, but we are going to have to look at other ways to package our food, materials we use. There's a lot of different things that are connected to this. And so we really need to rethink how we design what we design and how we do the energy in our buildings. And I think that in the same way that you've mentioned, oh, we're fine, we've got this, it's okay. It's the same thing if we think, oh, we've set up our energy, we're okay. But it's not. It's like all around us. So we really have to be thinking broader.
All those things we can do locally are good and important, but they're not going to get the job done. Dealing with plastics is a wonderful thing to deal with, but in fact, it's not going to save us and save our planet. What we have to do is somehow, I don't know whether it's going to take marching in the streets or what, but I think you're absolutely right. And I am worried about that false sense of security that you're talking about. We've all done a great job. The town's put a lot into this. We've got a great sustainability coordinator. That's all wonderful, but it's not going to get the job done.
Anybody else? Comments? Alex? Please.
Good evening. I'm Alex Abbott. I live at Cove Road, One Cove Road in Freeport. And some of you know that my work entails an aspect of sustainability. I'm a stream restoration specialist, so I spend my time across the state of Maine and across the eastern U.S. focusing on primarily upgrading of stream crossings, bridges and culverts, and all that entails to address the ecological need of reconnecting streams. And this relates directly to, of course, sustainability. It's noted in plan right now. I sent an email the other day to the board, I don't know if you've all seen that, with some comment about how the plan might a little bit more specifically address stream crossings. But I just wanted to speak in context, appreciating what Bill Rickson had to say and what all of you have just discussed. I think it's really important, and I would not be here, and I know you would not be here if we ever thought that this plan would be simply sitting on a shelf here in Town Hall. The point is to take action every way we can, including very strong statements as a town, as individuals, that we will do all we can, and we must all do all we can to address the problems that climate change is sending our way. What I'm bringing to you, this desire for the town to specifically address stream crossings, is in a way so much easier than dealing with those thorny issues of grand political and economic weight related to the fossil fuel industry. They're connected, don't get me wrong, but we as a town have the opportunity through a state funding mechanism, which again, I noted in my note to the board the other day. The Maine DOT now has charge of a program of grant funding that used to be run through DEP for its history since 2015. I've been very involved in all that to try to get money to municipalities to upgrade stream crossings. And this is something that's been really successful, and it's been following appropriate standards that I've helped to develop over the years, and the program continues. And yet Freeport has only ever applied for 2 crossing replacement upgrades over the years. I've talked to Adam Bliss about it, but I know he's very busy, both with all the work that you're engaged in together and other things that he's responsible for. But I would implore you and implore us to integrate into the plan a little bit more when we think about streams, about our local waters, about natural waters, and the lands through which and over which they run, that we can make use of some great public funding sources, such as Maine DOT's Culvert Upgrade Grant Program, to dramatically improve our stream crossings, and this will help people and their ability to use the roads that we now use, our fisheries, and simply ecological function of all of our watersheds in the town. I don't want us to miss this opportunity that brings together beautifully all of the aspects of sustainability that we all probably are very interested in anyway, with addressing climate change. All of what we talk about when we talk about upgrading stream crossings relates to trying to allow for much greater variability of floodwaters. And so that's an important aspect that small, but I think vital, and I want us to make sure that we work together to try to include some aspect of this infrastructure improvements in the plan. And if you have any questions for me, I'm glad to answer.
I do. Do those go on a regular calendar? Because I think there was one that came through to the Sustainability Board email, and that may have been the one I forwarded on to, I think, Carrie and you and maybe Adam. And I know it was a very short deadline, the person who had sent it to us, but I didn't know if it was one of those, all of a sudden it pops up and then, we're scrambling to try and get it.
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's changed hands from DEP to DOT only within the last year, and so we did know for the last few months that mid-January was going to be the deadline, and it was. So I think and I hope that DOT will now remain the steward of those funds, and that the funds will keep coming through the legislators voting every other year for transportation bond funds to support that kind of work. DOT hasn't always supported this kind of crossing upgrade in the past, but I think now that they're responsible for the program themselves, it's going to continue to be successful, and that it will be probably on an annual basis, but we don't know yet until they make some internal decisions about whether it could be twice a year, 2 rounds a year, which it used to be for a little while, or 1 round a year. Either way, it amounts to, right now, $200,000 for a stream crossing to replace in any given town, times 2. Each town could apply for 2 of them every year. So if we have, I can't remember how much the plan said, we have 48 problematic stream crossings in town that we know about. If we did 2 a year, in 24 years, if the funding were to continue, we'd be getting somewhere. So just to put things in perspective. Thank you.
Great. Yeah. Anybody else have any questions or comments for Alex? Great. Thank you very much, Alex. And is that something that you can kind of keep us updated on too, so we can reference that in our, in the implementation section? I think I had sent that on to you anyways, when you sent your email. Thank you for your email. And we can just include it. Is that something?
I'd be happy to keep you updated, but I'd also, and happy to answer any questions that come along the way. I'd very much to work with Adam as much as possible to help us move the town's planning effort to that end further.
Great. So we'll definitely call it out so that that's, can be on the radar for sure. Yes, because we are definitely looking for any funding opportunities to make these things happen. Yeah.
Question. So it's $200,000 per grant issuing. Does that typically cover like what the needs of Freeport would be? Or should there be funding a lot, or is there matching that needs to be done by the town?
Great question, Kristen. The match requirement is technically zero, but you get points for how much match you provide. Typically, many municipalities who've received these grants over recent years have put in as little as 5% match. So this is not a typical grant from a lot of different organizations. This is very minor match. It's really a program that's meant to address the needs of many municipalities which don't have nearly the tax base that we do. And it's really working well to that end. So that's a great benefit of this program, is that it doesn't require a lot of match, but the more match we can put into it, the better we will score, the more likely we will be to get one or both applications that we would submit.
Actually, to follow on to her question, can you, if one stream crossing cost more than the 200,000 and you didn't have the match, could you do a phased grant process where you got maybe both in the year that could apply to one crossing? Do you know if that's
No,
even an
you could
option?
not apply
Okay.
for 2 grants for one crossing, 1 grant to 1 crossing. So if we have a much larger crossing that requires $400,000, we would be in it for the match, all that match.
Okay,
Right.
okay, good to know. Great, thank you very much. I guess, anybody else? Yes?
Hi, I'm Chalmers Hardenberg. I live over at 11 Somerset, not far away from here. I want to thank you for the chance to comment about this plan, and I want to echo what Alec and Bill have both said, that the plan is admirable. The goals, the actions, the implementation priorities, I have no quarrel with any of them. My problem lies in all. And I suggest we need to single out a few actions, and we need to create a sense of urgency, which Bill has talked about, and a sense of we are all in this together. I want to suggest a priority, and then something that will create a sense of urgency and a sense of we are all in this together. First, I want to recall the words of my graduate school department head 60 years ago. It is permissible to tilt at windmills, but not in all directions at once. So in this plan, I count 15 high-impact actions. I'm covering, as you know, I read a newsletter about what happens here in Town Hall. I'm covering the 18 town bodies where policy is created and implemented, and they're all busy. I'm afraid that if the cap gets in there without any priorities, it's going to be effectively doubling the work that all of them have to do. That's with the 15 high-impact plan actions. And of course, there's another 45 or so in the plan itself. Now, I know you'll say, and we all say, we want to do all of that. I say good, but not simultaneously. We don't have enough people to simultaneously devise policies on the 60 actions, or to carry out the policies on the 60 actions once you devise them. And I don't think you're going to get perceptible buy-in from residents when the plan is spread across 60 actions. So how are we going to sort this out? I want to suggest that the plan have one main objective, and that the town ensure best we can that the one objective be accomplished above and beyond all the others. Of course, as you have said, and as the plan itself says, the objectives and actions can change over time. But my point is now, this year, let's have one objective. Now you're saying, okay, well, what do you suggest for that one objective? And I can see 4 possible main priorities. The first one, which you've already discussed, is reducing greenhouse gas emissions. On page 14, the plan now says, if Freeport successfully implements all objectives in this climate action plan, we will move forward on our pathway to reach our net zero emissions target. As I said, this is admirable, but I don't think that should be our first priority. Why? Because we already have state and federal policies and money working on this. Second possible objective is to serve as a model for other towns or regions with appropriate actions that the town takes. I think this could be done with a few well-done actions, so maybe that's a first priority. The third is convince or lead the citizens to act as much as individually each one of them can. Now, I would say, yeah, this goal is the best chance of affecting policies across the state, the continent, the world. When Freeport people say, I am biking, or I am stopping using plastic cups, and they tell friends and family elsewhere, that individual model can affect others. Sounds like a good priority, but I suggest the town hand it over to NGOs like the Freeport Climate Action Now. There are a lot of other organizations out there which could help individuals move toward lowering our emissions. So now we get to the last point, prepare the town for the ever-increasing crisis. As the plan notes, those great pictures of the crisis that's happening. Storms, periodic events, sea rise, it's inexorable. Drought or drench, that's going to last for a period of years. I see this as the priority I'd like to see the board adopt because, first, it is local. We can see it actually happening as we work on the crisis. We can see it right here among our neighbors and on our land. And we can see its effect if, let's hope, our work does help us with the resiliency as nature continues to take its course. Now you say, oh, we've got that in there. It is, you're right, it is in there. Goal 8, people, services, and infrastructure in Freeport are prepared and resilient to climate change. That's great. What I think is lacking is a sense of urgency. Part of the text says, we need to protect the important services, infrastructure, and resources. Another part says, we have an opportunity to protect the people and places of Freeport. And those are both good. But they don't create the sense of urgency or the sense that we're all in this together. Page 5 of the implementation table has 3 action items listed as high priority, if I've read the colors correctly. And they all have short lead times. The first is create a process for systematically integrating state projections with the town manager as the lead person. The second is neighborhood emergency networks, town manager and community services. And the third is invest in public works. Those are all great, but they don't give me a sense of urgency, and they don't give me any sense that we are all in this together. My suggestion would be to develop a town-wide Act Now notification system. I know the plan does mention notification, but I'd like to see the town make that a flashing emergency, emergency, emergency every time when nature strikes back at us. I want to see us use the electronic sign in front of Town Hall and other means like sirens. So what I'm saying is the function of my suggestion is not only to address the immediate emergency, short or long term, like drought or rising water, but to get all residents on notice that the climate is an actual ongoing, slow-moving emergency, and to let everyone know also that damage to one is damage to all. The farmers suffering too much heat, the sewer system suffering from too much water, the beach getting washed away, Alex's stream crossings getting devastated. That's all a sign that nature is coming for all of us. So that's my suggestion for priority. Please, most of all, though, I urge the board and ultimately the town to adopt one overriding priority that we can, as a town, accomplish. If I were on the town council, when this plan comes up there, I would say, these 44 pages are great. These 60 action steps are marvelous, but could you please cut this down to maybe 4 or 5 actions we can get our arms around? Thank you for listening. Happy to discuss this or answer any questions about it.
Great. Thank you very much, Chalmers. Anybody have comments or questions? And Maddie's been talking with the staff, back and forth with the staff about this. And what is your sense from the staff on how that would work out? I mean, the idea of having 1 or 2 that are must-haves each year or something like that, I mean, that does seem like a very reasonable and expected goal, to have something really in the sand. And do you know how they might feel about something like that?
Yeah, so I was speaking with the town manager last week just about the timeline and the roles that we have listed in the implementation table, just to kind of ground truth those. And so in a couple minutes, we'll be talking about some suggested changes from that conversation. But yeah, it became, clear that this plan is, as we all know, it's a municipal plan, so it's going to be operating through the levers available to municipal government, and it will be kind of dispersed throughout departments and over time. And I think that the specific timeline of when can we do this action and how are we going to blend this into the annual budget and our work plans, that kind of specific work, I think we can get started on in the next month or so, but I think that is up to department heads that have more kind of insight into capacity and ongoing priorities, and really blend that in with the town manager's leadership and council's leadership, blend that into ongoing work and balance it with all the other things that department heads and staff are working on. So I think that, yeah, I mean, I think it'll be a challenge, and I think we can do our best, as you recommended, to make sure that it's clear through this document that what is high priority and what we recommend, striving to get done in year 1, which I think we can talk about that in a couple of minutes as well. I have some recommendations, and maybe we can consider what Chalmers has said. But I think we can do our best to set up the system for project management and identify our priorities. But at the end of the day, we'll have to kind of roll it into the process that staff and leadership already work with to make these decisions and move things forward, if that makes sense. I was a little rambling.
No, I mean, it seems like, is that something that, I don't know if it's something that we can put in our plan, that we recommend that they come up with 2 things each year or 1 thing, but maybe that is something that we have to go, that the town council has to decide. I mean, we might not have that in our power, but we can make a recommendation.
Yeah, so in the final chapter of the plan, it lays out some kind of values for implementation, and that's a space where I think we can say, like, we really feel, these 2 actions in the first 5 years, year 1, year 2, year 3, this is what we think is most important, most valuable, and maybe could work with what municipal capacity kind of is at the moment or foresee in the next 5 years. But yeah, it'll be up to council to move things forward and up to staff to move things forward as they can, with advocacy and advisory kind of movement from FSAP and other boards, committees, and residents.
And I'm wondering even if, you're saying make a recommendation on specific actions to do over the next 5 years. And as we pointed out, those change, right? Sometimes something else bubbles to the top, there's money, whatever. So maybe even in that recommendation, just the structure of coming up with 1 or 2, choosing 1 or 2 that you're really going to follow through on. So maybe we're not necessarily directing those. They are in there as high priority, but just asking the town government, the structure of government here, to identify one or two to be sure that that really can get pushed through in a year, so that we feel like, so maybe that's in structure.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't want what we suggest to be dictated by what people, the staff, think they can do, because I think they can do more than they think they can do, for one thing. And what we're talking about here is, individual actions. That's not what Chalmers is really talking about. What he's talking about is like preparing the town for what is going to happen. Now, that itself requires us to figure out what to do that. I don't see it as just one in a list to be picked off when the staff is able to handle it.
Well, that overlaps with the emergency management plan already, correct?
I think you probably know more about it than I do.
Yeah, and then this will all feed into the comprehensive plan. So the three of them all work together, and that has been being updated, correct? The emergency management plan right now. And we do have overlap with that in terms of resiliency and stuff. And yes, not saying, oh, find out what you can do and get it done.
Right.
It's more of saying, make sure you get done at least a certain number, is more
Well, not
like
just
trying
a
to ask
number.
a structure. He's asking to make a high priority.
Right.
Is what Chalmers is asking
Right,
for.
and I think that's a reasonable request.
Yeah.
And it does sort of, makes us sort of massage the way we approach it in a way, because you point out there's the emergency, but I don't know how deep that is and what emergencies it's dealing with and how much we are actually publicizing that.
Yeah, I don't know if that's
Maybe.
available on the town website, is it?
The emergency management plan is being updated right now, and it does that kind of like a comprehensive plan. The outline and the chapters are kind of set requirements from the county, and so Freeport will be creating this plan, and there's a chapter on kind of climate change and preparedness. And so I would be
Okay, that's
working with Paul Connolly, the fire chief, to kind of build that out and pull from some of the vulnerability data we have from here, storm surge, heat, flooding, things like that. So like Mandy said, it'll kind of all dovetail
Good.
together to create a more strategic and, well-balanced approach to preparing for a climate emergency. But I guess I'm wondering, Chalmers or Bob or anyone, if you could speak to kind of operationalizing that
right.
resilience as a priority. Like, would you see that, I think our public health and community resilience, that fifth focus area, is it your recommendation to kind of bring that up in the plan and spotlight it more and say, number one, this is our first and foremost goal to be implemented, or how would you see that working through?
Well, thanks for asking. My number one point is to choose a priority so that whenever you or the town council or the staff is thinking, what should I do now, or where should we put our bucks, we say, oh yeah, we labeled X as the priority. And I'm suggesting it be the town resiliency because of how local it could be. So I would just say that that's where we want to put our money first and foremost, because, and I just, maybe I'm just too procedure oriented here, but I just want to have people think, what is the one thing we want to get done? And then after that, what are the things? But let's get that done. Let's keep that on there. And as I said, I think it's valuable, the community resiliency, because it can involve everyone. It can get buy-in from everyone, and we can see it.
Well, and, go ahead.
I'd like to chime in. I think we started this whole process with kind of two main issues. Basically, the how to minimize Freeport's contribution to climate change, and then how to help Freeport adapt to the changes that are coming. And I think they're both really important, and I think Chalmers may be onto something in that if we lose track or we focus too much on one or the other, we can get a little out of whack. So I'm not sure I would go so much as to one, but I would think we would want to keep the two big motivations or big goals clear, and perhaps in the way we suggest for the metrics and for setting up how we document that we're meeting our goals, that we don't let ourselves get too lost in lots of different goals, but we come back and focus, well, like, year one, are we working hard on both these two main things? Or have we gotten a little off track and just focused on one and not the other? So I think, I agree that the citizens here in Freeport, if we kind of, I'm not saying it's happening, but I think if we did let the kind of the resilience part that may be not as flashy, if we let some of that slide, that would be a mistake. And so anyway, I guess that's my recommendation, that we try to make sure that we set things up so that there's tracking and there's kind of balance between those two big goals.
Yeah, I was thinking similarly. I think multiple goals and keeping track of them, and also, and I think we have some notes, maybe it's in one of the appendices, I'm not positive, but think about, there are certain things for the town to take on, and then there are a lot of community partners that can also play really critical roles in advancing these strategies. And so I think part of our role is coordinating both with the town and with community members and organizations and agencies to see how we can all compile our resources to have the greatest impact on these strategies. Well, yeah, keeping track of priorities in each year and what's the sequencing. Sometimes like certain things like depend on something else to happen. So I think we have to be mindful of that throughout the process and kind of keep it alive and processing as we're going through it.
Recently, a friend had sent me a link to community, it's a priority-based budgeting. I sent this on to Medi and Caroline and Cecilia, and the City of Flagstaff uses this. So I can send you the link, Chalmers. This may give you some idea of how that can work together, because I agree with you. It's hard. Everybody has got a lot on their plate in all the different committees, and this is a way of sorting it. And I know Sophia is looking at a lot of ways to organize things really well. She seems like a great organizer. We're lucky to have her. So I think any way that we can make our climate action plan fit in with something like that to make it easier for the staff and others to be able to make priorities with it. So, maybe we can again look at this and just give a quick review of our cap so it fits in there. But I also want to highlight something from what you're saying, which is, I think that there's definitely a role for the Sustainability Board to educate the community. Now that'll be our follow-on from this, not only help with implementation, but making those, connecting the dots. But this is an emergency over here, this is what the town is doing about it, and you may not realize what impact this has somewhere else. And so I think that is a really important role for us, so that people understand what each of these actions really does, not just that pinpointed thing, but the ripple effects, both positive and negative. So it's a big job for us. Yeah, Susanna.
Yeah, and just picking up on another point that Chalmers made about other organizations in town, nonprofits and other groups, figuring out where their strengths are, and if they want, and how to have other groups that are not the town take ownership of segments of this, which could be helpful for dissemination.
Any other thoughts? Anyone? Kristen, yeah.
So as I listened to Bill and Chalmers, like their common thread was that we have to convey this sense of urgency, that it was yesterday, not tomorrow. And yet, so what Bill speaks to is that, stopping the damage, like changing our ways, and yours is protecting ourselves from the mess we made. Which is sort of what, Jim was saying. So when you talk about, setting a few priorities, which obviously one will show up the other, do we make sure that whatever, like we say, okay, in 2 years we want this is a priority to attack, and this should those be in those two different buckets to make sure we're covering both. And then the whole, people bringing up having other organizations take on some of this work. A lot of that work is around like accessing funding, federal, state, private. And it seems like that is a place too where the business community really, because we have so many business-oriented organizations in town, that we weave that in there. Like, that's a little more urgent too, that they step up and start kind of, both transitioning into what we're doing and how we're doing it in town, and then accessing funding. Because the other thing that people are saying is, what is our town's capacity? But if that's always what's dictating what happens, they're just going to, that is what's happened, is like, oh, we can't afford that, or we need to wait for the federal government to get its act together, and that's not going to happen. So, I think it's true that maybe some of the wording needs to be made a little more urgent, and kind of pointing out that there's some groups that should be stepping up to the plate.
If I may, I would suggest that I agree with you, Kristen, about the wording be more urgent, but that it not be in the rather flowery and beautifully colored and laid out plan, but in the actual action steps themselves. Talk about urgent and as Jim said, what's going to happen in the first year.
That may be a transition to what you've been working on just the last week or so.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, Chalmers.
Oh, I want to thank you all for the feedback, which is something, as you know, I've really wanted to get. Thank you.
Thanks, Chalmers.
Yeah, and I think so. I think as we go through the process of presenting this to town council, we'll get a better sense of what they are looking for from this document as a guiding document for their work, some of their work on this issue. And so they might work with us to develop a more detailed timeline, or that's something that they take on or that town management takes on. I think personally for me, it's we'll just kind of go through this process. We do have a new town manager, and I think that there's room for new processes and new ideas. The same thing is happening in Yarmouth, so we're kind of just rolling with it and understanding how we can leverage this process to support urgent action that really fits in and is kind of, it's a bad term, well-oiled, but like just like really. Just really sets us on the right track for completing actions in this plan and bringing in partnerships and doing it right. So that's all just to say that I think as we go through the next couple of months, we might have some more kind of concrete ideas passed down to us from council and town management, as they say. We'd really like this plan to have this framework so we can make decisions, or, so we might not have all the answers by the time we get there, but they can help us make the decisions as decision makers. So yeah, thank you so much for the comments, and we have less than 30 minutes left in our meeting, and we were just going to go through a summary of comments from last time and talk through some decisions that if the board's ready to make, we can kind of tick those off, and we have some others to kind of consider from this conversation as well. So if you'd like to leave, you're welcome to. But yeah, so for the board, I met with Caroline and Sophia last week to go through the implementation table. And, you know, I think, and it's come up through this conversation, just how do we balance the urgency and the priority based on the impact and what we need to accomplish based on our goals, based on the science, you know, and municipal capacity, and making this a realistic and actionable plan that the town feels like they can kind of pick up and run with. So I think there is some qualitative juggling of those two things in the timeline. But there's some specific changes that were suggested by Caroline and Sophia last week that I think I pointed out and can just kind of highlight. So they suggested changing the timeline to be, I think, a little bit more accurate. So when we look at the implementation table, the short timeline, they think that could be 2024 to 2025. So this like year one priorities. And then medium term 2026 to 2029, and long 2030 to 2035. And I think that better reflects the planning horizon of this plan. So thinking long term is like 9 years from now, because at that time, like, hopefully we'd have done a lot of this. We're going to reevaluate. We'll have new data. We'll have new ideas, and progress will have been made. So, you know, there'll be an update to this plan for sure. Before we had, I think, 2030 to 2050. And it's like the actions in here should be maybe not looking out that far.
Did those years coordinate with our emissions targets?
The original ones or the new ones?
The ones that we
suggested?
just, the new ones they suggested with the actual years on them, do they coordinate with what the town council passed for our emissions?
So
Dates, because we have years on that.
Yeah, so this lines better, so
Okay.
that the document would be
Good.
really addressing that front-loaded target and reducing emissions for 2030 and 2040, and not kind of aiming to predict what we'll need to do in 2040 to 2050 or 2037. Just understanding that it's limited, we'll have new data and new methodology, and we'll be kind of reorganizing later on. And then they suggested, I don't know if you want me to run through them, or if we just want to talk. We have limited time about the comments that they suggested that I sent over.
Let's go over them.
Okay.
We have time, Mandy.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So another suggestion that they made was to change the roles definition. So instead of support, advisor, A for advisor. So on actions where we have, you know, FSAB as support, FSAB as advisor, or, you know, planning board as advisor to planning staff, that kind of adjustment seemed to kind of fit a little bit better in how decisions would be made. So following from that, the bulk of that conversation was focused on kind of understanding their perspective on the roles for who would be implementing the actions, and just getting a better understanding of kind of like the administrative code and how town management would like to have boards and committees be utilized, and kind of leaning on council committees like the ordinance committee and the municipal facility committee. So taking a little bit more off FSAB's plate, which I think is probably good, because there's a lot of work that you guys are already doing and a lot that you can be advisors for, but fitting those in with different committees. As far as the actions they recommended changing, there was just 3, I think. The first one is to break out have a new action, which is to pursue funding to install public EV charging stations at municipal facilities. So previously, that was an implementation consideration in a different action, and they said, well, that's really its own kind of thing. Why don't you put it as an action so that it can have its own champion and be moving quickly? There's that.
Is that the only one that they asked to pull out pursuing funding for?
For funding?
Because it's pursue funding to install, so it's pulled out as that's the action, is pursuing the funding. So
That was
that's
the
only
language,
one.
that was the language in our implementation consideration, so we just kind of flopped it into a new action. What
Right.
about, but I think if that's the right mechanism, is your point, like, is it pursue funding, or is it?
Yeah.
Like,
So
what
then is
that's
it pursue funding
needed?
for stream, culvert, whatever? Is it?
Right.
Do you do that with other ones that we had in that same way to make a match? Because that was what Alex was just talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Yeah.
that if it's like, maybe we can get more specific with the stream crossing one, if it's like,
Yeah.
allocate X amount for match funding for the stream crossing, or what
Pursue the
is,
funding.
what is the barrier? Is it time, resources? Is it prioritization? They just kind of get filtered down, and, we need to lift them back up and provide funding.
Well, with that one, it was a time, and they couldn't get any contractors. So we missed that EV funding opportunity.
Yeah,
So, so it, depends on how you want to frame
right.
that one. And sounds like it's similar for the stream ones.
Yeah.
It was a time and labor, or, somebody to do it.
Yeah. And then the other action that they split apart was in the lands and waters chapter. There's an action 6.1.2, which was about incorporating low impact development into the capital improvement plan, town operations, and land use policies and ordinances. And they just said, well, that's, again, like, that's kind of two processes, split out land use policies from capital improvement and town operations. So just kind of procedurally, that makes sense to them. So that was a suggested change. And then about the action that we had been talking about the last couple of weeks about the branded recycling network downtown. They thought that before investing in that kind of infrastructure, just having a little bit more education and see if we can kind of just, I guess just focusing on education, outreach, kind of culture building, behavior change, before investing so much in an infrastructure network that might, that takes public work time and could be,
Yeah, I
whatever.
think I expressed that to you.
Yeah.
I'm 100% behind that, because just because you build them doesn't mean that they will come on that one. And so, and it's also a cost, like, who is going to empty those? They also get filled with lots of things. This is an area that I've been watching for decades now. So I think that the attempt to educate both the public and the businesses and have, carrots and sticks in both ways would be good for that.
Yeah, and I think that there could be a lot of creative opportunities with that education if it's like pilot bins or, like, I think it doesn't have to be void of physical demonstrations and real behaviors, but so that was their suggestion there. And then,
I know, and some businesses might want to even take that on. for that
Right,
Sort of
yeah.
public presentation, so that might be really nice.
Yeah.
Because we have some very good recycling companies that do a lot of good recycling in our town
yeah.
with their products and stuff.
And then the only other kind of item I wanted to point out, which I had sent over in a PDF document to you all, was in kind of recognizing this balance of prioritization and really just project management and what are we going to get done first and who's going to do it. And so I just put, a couple of thoughts on paper, which is for a page that just pulls out not actions from the plan necessarily, but like what are some things that are related that need to be happening while we're gearing up to do these other things? And I think that was an idea I had, and we could expand it to be a year one priority. It's this action, this action, this action, but I just wanted to float that by you all as kind of a recommendation for year one. Part of that being get ready.
Right, right.
Management and council, like, start dividing work and really set up department heads and councils and committees and whatever to do this work. But what else can actually get done in year one? I just thought that would be an interesting kind of value add for internally, and also for, if we can make it something really actionable that the community's like, sweet, we did that, like, held event on X topic, or expanded municipal sustainability page, website, whatever, like little things that really can get checked off and be celebrated.
In that, do you imagine, I think one thing that would be really nice is to show how those determined actions would integrate with each other, so how they affect each other, and just showing it as a bigger interconnected thing, which is, they're not happening in silos. So if there's a way to do that, I think that would also help with the public in education and understanding and buy-in.
Are you, when you say that, Medi, like, first year, like, let's do this, is that a separate sort of just work plan outside of the climate action plan? It's just so everybody can get their ducks in a row internally?
I think it could go either way. I think it could be an internal document, or it could be something that we're transparent with the community about, and it is, attached with the plan to be adopted by council as like, and here's what we intend to accomplish in 12 months, whatever.
The preparatory.
So it could be both internal organizational tool and kind of a transparency mechanism for. But yeah, open to ideas. I was thinking the same thing as some of the comments we've heard tonight, like, we might be missing a piece about, real prioritization, and as far as having this really not live on a shelf. And if there's a space where FSAB can make its recommendation of urgency known, it would be maybe even in the action table, and also could be something else.
And I think in that, like, emphasizing what might happen if you wait on some of those, right? The losses that would happen. So it can become something that, in both ways, shows the urgency.
Yeah, I think there's
Because there are losses when we don't act right away on certain things.
Yeah, I think certainly that internally I'm envisioning like a Gantt chart that's really laying out the steps. Like, you have to kind of lay the foundation for this before you would go ahead and try this policy. This is really a kind of a waterfall of action, and it's not all going to cost money. It's not all going to happen in 5 years. So I think in my vision, that would be in the plan, but I'm just kind of feeling out how that might really look, and if we can stand behind some of those assumptions of order of operations and things like that. So I don't want to open a can of worms. I just want to get organized and set up for success. So that's the vision, and if there's some kind of compromise, what we think we can kind of pull off for this process, we can do it. Otherwise, I just started a list, which I think we can do better than that. So.
Yeah. Well, we've seen what you can do, so we know we can we can do great things.
The other thing that models is that everybody needs to change the way they think about doing things and how they do them and when and where. So if the town government and, staff is doing that, like just sitting down and rethinking. Because that's what all of humanity needs to do, So
then they're modeling the behavior that
Exactly.
we're asking for. Yeah. I have a question on one that's on your list here, is just the changing the library of things to Sustainability Lending Hub. And what specifically is it a tool lending library? What is it? Because I just want to be, Sustainability Lending Hub is just an even library of things is just such a big concept.
Yeah.
So is it a tool lending library? I know that they tried to do one, and I know it's not, there was a big phase on those, and then they kind of crashed in the repair cafes and stuff like that. So is that
Yeah.
something that we can conceivably do, and are we naming it really?
Yeah, I think so. Sustainability lending hub is just an idea of like, maybe that is a more appropriate or approachable term. Lending hub, like Library of Things, I think is still pretty new to folks. I think they're both open to like, is it tools? Is it supplies and gear and whatever, people are interested in? I think the idea it would be more than tools, like it would include tools, but it would also serve really as a hub for like repair cafes and other kind of outreach on circular economy and,
And where would that be? And who
so,
would fund it?
yes, that is.
Because
what
that's where I've
we would
seen it
need to
fail
work
in communities.
So Sophie, in talking about this, Sophie had mentioned that in Orono, I think where she was previously, they had one, or she had worked in a community that had a very successful.
It was probably Orono,
Library,
and
she's
that kind of
interested
thing can
in
happen
seeing
really
it.
successfully in a school town. That's a university town.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. We're not a university town, so I
Yeah.
worry about it happening here, just because, San Francisco, we had those, and there's, but I do see us having, maybe it's not a lending hub, we do use it through our library, or we use it through one of our buildings, where it also encourages people in the community to work in their own little mini lending hubs. So like, maybe I'm not going to go to this big one, and then what if somebody returns the tool broken, and there's sort of an anonymity to it, whatever. It's not a book. It's different than a library, but maybe I share with my neighbors or a few people I know one of these tools. So encouraging people to do that, education about that. It's even like how you set up carpooling sometimes for people. So it's almost like a sustainability hub that's beyond just the tools, because
Yeah.
you run into a lot of issues and expense with the tools, and you need people to repair them, which is, one of the problems they were having with the cafes. The cafes came out of Europe first. They were doing them.
South Portland is doing this.
Yeah.
And it's not a university town. And it's being pretty successful of actually having a building out at where they have the public works. And they did get a grant to have someone actually be out there certain hours, certain days of the week when that property was open. And they had so many lawnmowers, so many different, but basically it was tools, lawn tools that in fact would get away from gasoline. And that's why the sustainability idea makes some sense. And we hope to do it here. And Courtney at the library thought it could be done, but it would need more staff. There would be land there in back of the library to locate a structure, a small structure. And we talked with Public Works about doing what repair work needed to be done on them. So I think it could be something that really could, and that means I don't have to go buy my own. And there's a place I know that's going to be open 3 days a week that I can go out and sign it out for so much time. I can use it, I return it, and it's there for somebody else to use. And we don't all have to buy the same thing.
They do have that at Home Depot, though. Places do. So that's why I'm wondering, like,
Home
where.
Depot is there.
Right,
I'm
right.
talking about here.
Yeah. I'm just seeing what would, if we're going to put money towards it for its sustainability, like its long-lasting ability and the staff. And there's the land behind the library sensitivity.
I know during at least some of the workshops and just talking with people, I personally think that our transfer station has so much potential.
Yeah, huge.
It's where most of the waste is going, so it's getting people there thinking about what's actually in those big dumpsters. And I've been there to drop stuff off, and there's staff there, and there's a lot of downtime there. So I feel like perhaps that's a place that has the capacity to sort of manage those issues, the lending out and receiving back and inspecting. And I mean, there's a lot of space there, and there's just other ways that it could be used as an educational hub for all sorts of things,
Yeah.
not just the circular. stuff, but
I had
also
made a
when we've
suggestion.
talked about doing cool, like, making the data visible for people, lots of visuals and goal setting and, cheerleading and making the general public feel like they can be successful and contribute to reduction or change.
Yeah, I think that I like the dump idea. I was just reflecting on the conversation that we had with some of the residents at the Freeport Housing Trust. And the idea of sharing libraries was definitely something that they spoke a lot about with enthusiasm. And I think they, just to kind of segue to a little bit more of some of what we heard in that session was also just a lot, and I think it's what Bill was speaking about earlier, like how do we work through this process to really build a mindset that kind of comes through town of reuse and bringing that into our building, whether it's into building codes or creating incentives for when we're building housing, like, so that people can really easily, if they're in shared apartment spaces, can really easily use reusable materials. Like right now, that's hard in a lot of housing situations because there's not shared kitchen space or other things. So really thinking about that reuse through not just shared libraries and lending, but kind of throughout all of the policies that get enacted in town.
Yeah, I think the transfer station does have a lot of opportunity, and they have, sometimes it's been closed where they have the free stuff, and sometimes it's open. I had also, I don't know if I suggested it to the whole group or I sent it to you, but an artist in residence program, a lot of transfer stations and dumps do that, and out in California, but I don't know if anybody's been doing it here in Maine. But that is a really fun way to get people excited about reuse and art and materials and things. So just things that are, as you were saying, that are very public, that the town or the businesses, and a business could sponsor that artist in residence, and it's during the season in the summer, and people would want to go and see. Or,
Especially-
just opportunities.
Yeah, those people that are, repurposing and making things. Like I was just so Audubon's going to have like a workshop, somebody that shows you how to make baskets out of, T-shirts.
Right. There could be even workshops there that happen.
And it
in
would
season.
be yet another place for people to come together. I mean, I really like going to the dump because,
I like
always
going.
see somebody there.
I know, I
And-
purposely go to the dump.
And so, yeah, just to kind of make it a little more,
Pass that down to Maddie.
yeah, just a little more welcoming and, people stay.
Yeah,
Come stay at the dump, spend your Saturday.
I love that idea,
Yeah.
personally, yeah.
Is there one for this meeting?
Any other thoughts? We're getting close to 8, but I
Yes.
think that's, so maybe we're looking at we got our eyes on the transfer station.
Yeah, so I think just kind of recapping, I think that it sounds like that action is well supported by, throughout the process. That's been of interest to people. And sustainability lending hub, like that specific phrase, does anyone have any objections? Otherwise, we could,
Well,
or any other ideas?
can we think on it a little more?
Yeah, of
Okay.
course.
It would be
I
nice to
think
come
it's-
up with
it's-
something
that
cool, like
covers
a
all-
branding,
yeah,
talking that
something cool,
circular
yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
that doesn't have to be
reuse,
like the
yeah.
official name, just the term we're using to refer to it, or, I don't really think that's super important at
I
this
think if we can
exact
encompass all of what we just talked
Yeah.
about,
Yeah.
it's a little more than lending, but
Yeah.
lending is part of it. So let us think on that
Yeah.
a little bit.
And I like
'cause,
hub better than library too, because
I
it's
like
like
hub.
whoosh, that
I like hub.
circular.
Yeah, hub is very good.
Great
Yes,
idea.
especially for circular economy
Yeah.
and all
Yeah.
that. So it
Tie it
is.
to
Hub is
sustainability for
great.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, good.
And so then, yeah, just recapping so that I kind of know what I can be working on in between this and the next meeting. So what do you all think about adding an action for stream crossing, what Alex was referring to? So a new action referred to, whatever it is. Is it pursuing funding, reprioritizing, like what is the mechanism there? But
Right. and
stream crossing for habitat and safety
Yeah.
and
I
resilience.
think that's good, and I think it may tie into another action that's, some committee, you mentioned that there's a committee in town that's working on emergency preparedness. So, but it kind of takes it, you know, gives it a little twist and a little.
Oh, your
Turn on
microphone.
your mic.
Oh, sorry.
You got the
Yeah.
red lights.
So anyway, I like that idea, but it seems like it interrelates with that other thing. But it may be worth emphasizing it or adding the issue of applying for the funding that the people that are making the policies may not be that aware of the funding sources and such. And then just circling back, maybe you're about to do this, but as far as the one-year priorities, I think that's good, and I think I'm happy with the short and medium and long-term dates that seem to be better. As far as the one-year priorities, I think we should look at those together and then take a step back and make sure that they cover a variety of things, so that, it's nicely balanced.
Any other comments on the suggested change to time frame or the roles? I mean, I think if you go through the document where I kind of highlighted some of the changes
Okay.
from that conversation, you could find specific things, but just noting that some of those are tweaked, so a more careful look would be great.
Yeah, an advisor, that sounded like a great switch out, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of.
So
nice.
Mandy, I had made a suggestion, actually, I hadn't made it, but Mason had made it, that in that area where we talk about things we can control, but then other things that are individual action, that we give actually a shout out to Freeport Can as a local organization that can be used to help on that, seem to fit in there if other people think it would make some sense. He was thinking that it really ought to be right in the climate action plan, because what we do, his point was, we can measure certain things, and this plan does that. But the things that we do individually, like Kristen was talking about, we really can't measure, and there's no way, it's not our fault that we can't measure them, that's just the nature of the beast. So we've got our plan that concentrates on things, but like Megan, you were talking, I think, about using other organizations to help, that I think we should have some recognition of that in the plan itself.
Yeah, so I just briefly, as Bill was talking, I was thinking about, and maybe just he directly suggested this, but adding a page on the end of the plan that's kind of capping the story and the narrative of the plan and the action, but saying like, and we'll need the state to act, and we'll need the federal government to act, and maybe mention the treaty, or have some kind of specifics around like the context
idea.
of today. And that's a place where we can kind of couch, and this is just the one piece, like this is just the municipal action, and it doesn't necessarily get at all the opportunities that are, that we need individuals and households and families and businesses to take outside of the scope of this document. So kind of getting at that, this is urgent, but this is not the whole story. Just kind of capping off the narrative of the plan if people get to the last page. But that was just an idea. So yeah, I'm happy to hear your thoughts or reactions to that.
Well, I think I'm kind of building on that. If I'm not sure if this is appropriate, but if we did want to mention civic organizations that were working in the same directions and helping implement the plan in different ways, and I mean, there's FCAN, but there's also several others that
Many.
that it would make sense, rather than just saying one or two. I think we should mention, because there have been other conservation groups here, and there are others. We all talked with quite a lot, and So I wouldn't want to slight any of those, but I think it might be an opportunity to list those, which might help people tie into, certain things that would be more, more exciting to them.
And that also kind of just speaks to like what's available in our community.
Yeah.
It's just, I'm just constantly floored
There's so
meeting
much.
who lives here and what they do with their, like, for their work. And not everybody realizes that. So it just sort of highlights the actual capacity of the town and opens people's eyes to maybe if they just want to get involved in small ways.
And I don't think it needs to be the last page. I mean,
Right,
that can be,
fair point.
that can be earlier on, or, sort of an introduction to why we're doing this, for example, that leads in. And it can be, those intro pages that a lot of people skip over anyway because they want to get to the content. So I don't think it's necessarily going to bog people down and that they won't read beyond that. But I think it would be great to have something there.
I'd like to react a bit to what Jim said. Jim, I've thought about that, but all those are great organizations. They all have their individual purposes. Freeport Climate Action Now is the only organization in town that its sole purpose and aim is to try to do locally what we can to deal with the climate crisis. And we've recognized that. In fact, the town has adopted the stretch code. I mean, we're acknowledging that here. And the rebate program. So I don't think it's like we're putting anybody down. We're saying that maybe we say local organizations like Freeport Climate Action Now. But I think that we want that organization to actually get active in helping happen in town what the board wants to have happen. So that's why I think it fits into that section. Really, on page 29, it would fit in. So that, I'll send everybody the language that Mason was suggesting. Okay?
Yeah, and I guess, I don't know, the way I had imagined it would be like, a list of different organizations and maybe a sentence about each. And, this organization is focused on such and such. AFCAN is focused on, climate action, big picture. And, I mean, they're all good. But anyway, that's just my initial thought.
It's interesting, is there any resource in town that lists all those amazing organizations?
Probably not.
Probably not.
Yeah,
I mean, there's an opportunity there, right?
yeah.
That's pretty cool.
You're right, Jim, they all contribute, but again, they all have their individual purpose. And what we're about with the Climate Action Plan is dealing with the climate crisis.
Well, we're also, yeah.
I mean, that's why we're here. That's why we need a sustainability plan.
But we also need, we need streams that can flood and release water, and there's a group that deals with that, which is part of it. I agree, FCAN is like broader than most groups, and it's different that way. But I guess just my reaction would be, let's highlight all these groups that are helping us out, that deserve more help and deserve people to join in with them. So anyway, that's my thought.
That's a good reason. But I do think we need to mention by name and what their purpose is.
Yeah, that seems good.
Let's see if we can get a list of the different organizations in town. Because I would be I agree with Jim that I would be very hesitant to say that there's a lot of environmental organizations in town, and I'd be very hesitant to say that any of them are not focused on climate. And I think everybody has their role to play.
Yeah.
And I mean, you look at FCAN and its mission overall is quite broad, but individuals in there are not doing everything for the most part. So it's in some ways, you've got people in their own interests and niches, and you've got people who can be incredibly impactful but they're only focusing on one area, and that doesn't negate what they're doing.
No, it's true.
So I think it would be really great for me, for my interest, I guess. I don't want to leave anybody out, and I think there's a danger in creating a list that we,
Yes.
do that.
The challenge.
But if we can start to formulate who's in the town, because I do think that, what Jim says about, just having maybe a sentence about groups that people can figure out what might interest them and just know what the resources in town could be. And to know also, when we're talking about climate, we're talking about something that transcends boundaries. We're talking about something that transcends so many different aspects of our life. That it's not, groups that talk about climate and work on climate are not just ones with climate in the name. They're not just obviously conservation, obviously environmental organizations. So I think capturing some of that could be really, really helpful because it acknowledges how wide-reaching this crisis is in our lives as well. And so I think, yeah.
I think this will be done if it just doesn't dilute, the actions that, Freeport is able to take because it's aimed at climate crisis.
Well, I think to the point of having the larger group underlines the fact that it's an integrated approach. And it's going to take all of these different groups working together in their core competencies, but understanding what's going on in the other groups and being able to make those connections. And that's the only way
That's a good
we're going to
point.
be able to solve it.
Yeah.
So, well, let's see
Okay,
what we
Good
can.
discussion, thank you.
Yeah, it was a good discussion. Thank you.
And it seems like the cap is like the place that's going to be captured.
Yeah.
Like what better place to
Attempt
have,
to get
to
a good
have
list.
that
Yeah,
compilation.
that concept of an integrated
Yeah.
functioning town.
And it might help
Yeah.
some of these different groups realize their commonalities and help them work together.
Yeah, and that's been a problem, that some people are working on the same thing and don't even know the other group is working on it. That keeps happening here, so it's
Can I
interesting.
just, so to the other end of that, you said there are some things, like also listing things that need to happen elsewhere before the town can proceed. Would you go so far as to perhaps list certain pieces of legislation that are in the works, or so that people can follow that, or is that just too much of a moving target?
Yeah, I think that,
Just so,
that might
like,
be
if
too
that's
kind
the
of
people, that is how people could
time-sensitive.
impact it,
Yeah.
that they could, give testimony or whatever to certain pieces of legislation that speak to them, or
That
just
could
so
be
they
some-
know what's on the docket, like, things are percolating.
Yeah, I think that would be, we might have to use a different kind of channel for that, whether it's a FSAB mailing list or other, do a legislative roundup kind of email.
Isn't a
to
priority
accompany
to
with
have a
this.
better, like a web presence for sustainability?
Yeah, I think we also
So-
need a
beyond that.
web
So
presence.
that's one of the action
Yeah.
priorities, so then we could have that as a
Right.
place to.
Yeah.
But yeah, so for that kind of thinking about state and federal context, I was thinking just kind of broadly, right? Like the state renewable portfolio standard is the one I kind of highlighted in the plan narrative of like, this needs to happen. We need to have renewable electricity in order to meet our goals. So things kind of like that are like broader,
Sure. Okay.
that aren't tied to necessarily action mechanisms, but they might be. So I had a couple other things on the list, and maybe we'll just have to get to them next time about proposed actions or proposed implementation considerations by folks. But maybe just take a look at those, and we can
Okay.
move forward next time.
Okay.
And I'll work on this
2 weeks from now?
Yeah.
2 weeks from now. So I guess if anyone is going to be watching this on Zoom or streamed, that there's an opportunity to comment on the plan. There are in-person printed binders, both here and at the library, with physical papers. If you want to write your comments down and leave them in the envelope, I'll be collecting them every week. And then online at the town's website, and also freeportclimateaction.org. There's opportunities to submit comments online. And if you'd like a personal response, you can email freeportsustainability@gmail.com or msmith@freeportmaine.com.
And the way it comes up on the town side is you go to, do you want to make a comment on it? That's the way you get to the plan.
That's on the Freeport Climate Action.
That's on the Freeport.
There,
.org.
yeah, they'll be in both websites will have the plan documents and the online
But
commenting.
as something you can get to directly without going to, I'd like to make a comment on the plan.
The comment on the plan is an online form, so you will have to kind of link to get to that form.
But that, if you hit that, it takes you to where the plan then comes up.
He's talking on the freeportclimateaction.org
You
site.
go there and you don't
go there
automatically see the
to the
plan.
homepage.
You have to figure out how to find the plan on the homepage.
Yeah, at the top of it,
Right,
it says,
okay,
do you want to
okay.
make a comment, or do you want something on the plan?
And
We
you
can
can
pull it
have
up.
something like, click here to see plan.
It should just say plan on
Okay.
there somewhere with a hot link.
Okay.
Yeah, just because you have to do something else, so to
Yeah,
your
there's,
point.
okay.
Yeah.
Noted.
It's not
We'll
clear.
change
People
it.
probably
Yeah, it's
do.
right on yeah,
Click here.
it's
Got
right
it.
on the, I can show you that.
Maddie, is there a deadline, like a stop point for receiving public comment?
See this?
So, oh,
You
yeah.
have to go there, offer feedback to get to the plan. So if there were a hot link here that said the plan, it might be easier for people.
Perfect. I'll make that change. There is no deadline at this moment. We're kind of like rolling comments, like we're going to see what comes in. Obviously, we didn't have, too many comments at this meeting, and we had some at the last meeting, but I think throughout the next 2 meetings I've had, we'll just make decisions based on what comments have come in. And I think that through the council process, it'll be up for comment again and like continue to be up for comment. So I wasn't going to put like a firm date, but thinking about like, 3 weeks, 2 weeks.
Are we still on track for trying to bring it to the council on April 2nd?
Yeah, I think it depends on how they would like to proceed with like presentations or workshop presentations and their, but theoretically we're on track.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right. Good, we're running over time.
Yes.
So are we set with that? We're going to look at it some more, right?
Yeah, I'll
And get back
highlight in
to
an
you.
email what
Excellent.
I'd love some feedback on
Perfect.
for next time, and then we can go from
Perfect.
there.
Thank you. And then we had just a couple other items on the agenda that we can just maybe zoom through. So, and they're quick. So trivia night. Trivia night is another opportunity to look at the printed out climate action plan. And so Susanna and I have been working on this, and it's in partnership with Maine Beer. And it's going to be March 18th from 6 to 8. And it's Maine-based trivia that we approached them, and we wanted to do something that we could weave some climate action stuff into in trivia, and they had just had a conversation about having a Maine trivia night, so it was perfectly timed. So we're getting together on that, and yeah, so and maybe we can bring some posters also to that, and we can mail it out to our email list. We're seeing if they can put it on their calendar. And you guys can come and join us or play, or either. Susanna, do you have other comments you want to say?
Yeah, no, that will be lots of fun.
It's going to be fun.
No, a couple other points.
Suzanne knows she's going to win.
No, we're writing the questions.
Yeah,
Oh, right.
It's fun.
I know, I'm not allowed. Otherwise, on April 10th, or rather the night of April 9th, the 10th at midnight, we're going to be doing, in conjunction with GMRI, Gulf of Maine Research Institute, we're going to be doing a high tide investigation. We've got 4 sites in Freeport that are marked, that we're monitoring for high tides, seeing what's happening to the surrounding structures, infrastructure, road, erosion, et cetera, at the high tide. We're projecting a high tide, according to NOAA, of 11.4 feet, which is not astronomical. Back in January on the 14th in Portland, it was 14.57 feet when we had the big flooding there, but it's 2 feet higher than the high tide of today. So it's still a sizable high tide. We may also do a low tide walk where we can see maybe how far up the seaweed got on the road, or see some of the damage that a previous high tide caused. So the plan for that is, midnight or just thereafter on April 10th, so the night of the 9th, and we'll update more on that. This Thursday, on another note, we are presenting or working with Freeport High School on the climate action plan. So Mehdi, I don't know if you're going to be there or if it's just me. I think, Kristen, you're away. So if anybody else wants to join, it's 10:30 to 11:15 at the high school.
Wait, at night?
No, in the day.
Oh, I thought you said Thursday night.
Oh, sorry, Thursday morning at 10:30 during the advisory period,
This Thursday,
this Thursday. So, yeah.
who's doing that?
So we're doing it in conjunction with the Earth Club.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Who's we?
Susanna.
There was a
yeah,
we, but
and-
now it's a Susanna.
Me too. I can.
And Maddie, now that it's 10 in the morning.
There'll be coffee. Yeah, maybe.
Is that done? Are you done with what you're doing? You got another one.
I have 2 more points. Yeah, I know, I'm busy.
Good.
Also, in terms of resolutions or address, if we want to take up the fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty, is it okay if I write up a thing for us to consider?
Please.
Yeah,
sure.
Okay, I can do that. And then we had also spoken probably last year, maybe, I don't know, I think, Mandy, I think I messaged you a while ago about divestment from fossil fuels.
Yeah, I think we talked about
That's
it
something
last
we
year.
had sort of briefly considered and said we were going to look into.
And the town council was
didn't.
interested.
Yeah. And we didn't pursue it any further, I believe. So I'd love to revisit that one as well.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Would you see that, and we could talk about this later, but would that fit in the climate action plan as like a
It could be, yeah, if the town, exactly,
Win.
exactly. And
win.
a quick win, and also going back to what Bill was talking a little bit about it as well. Here are some, here are some actions. Here's how this fits in, part of a bigger picture. This is something that's been done by other towns, other states, other areas as well. So it fits in with the state government practice as well.
Right, and
For
we just put it
others
on
in the state.
hold because we were working on the climate action plan. So
Yes.
now there's an opportunity to possibly bring it right back in.
Yeah, so I could
great.
prepare docs on both of those.
That'd be
and bring to
great.
us, and then we can, if we approve, we can take to the town.
I have one, Mandy.
Yeah.
In fact, you're involved in it.
Oh, I am?
Yeah, it's that home energy fair.
Oh, yeah, I didn't
on
even
March
get confirmation
22nd.
on that. Is it
Yeah,
happening?
It's going to happen.
Oh, okay,
It's going to
good.
be at
I think I
FCS.
roped Jim in on this one.
Oh, yeah,
Right.
I haven't heard any.
Well,
I
it's
haven't
sort
heard
of
any more
happening.
about either.
Well, anyway, it's coming together. And it's, Freeport Climate Action Now and Balsam Realty
Right.
are sponsoring it.
Right.
Which was
Great.
the same last year, although FCS was a sponsor last year too. And so there'll be people who have used solar and know how it works and can say, like you, Andy, right?
that's great.
And we think we'll have efficiency main people there. We think we'll have, maybe having some equipment there. I think we'll maybe have Sam Zuckerman from Maine Solar might be there. And I don't know whether it will be Scott from, come on, Bob, pull it together, Royal River, or someone else too. And I'm supposed to be able to talk about rebates
Great.
and tax credits and stuff like that.
Sounds good. What's the date and time for
It's
that?
March 22nd, 9 until 12. It's just going to be a short one.
9 to 12, it's a Saturday, correct?
It's a Saturday.
Yeah, yep.
Definitely.
Wait, March 22nd is a Friday.
Oh, 23rd.
Okay.
Thank you. March 23rd, thank you.
You're welcome.
You do everything. Thank you.
She's amazing.
I know you are. She is, so are you.
All right, I think, and do we have any
It's
other
an FCS.
announcements? We really have a lot on our calendar.
Yeah.
Woo-hoo.
Well, so tree task force, as people have been talking, Sophie's really trying to just kind of clean up everything in this building. So even though we've brought it twice, where she's backing us up and having us bring the, let's see, which plan did we, the tree, it was the first document we wrote 2.5 years ago, the tree program, which is just sort of a broad brush. Here's how we need to approach building tree canopy. We have to bring it to town council again. And then they need to just kind of say, yes, this sounds good, move on to the next step, which would be a tree management plan, which we already wrote. So things are just kind of getting backed up a little bit, and procedurally moving forward. There was really not the correct guidance about what was supposed to be happening with the work of the tree task force, because we are a temporary task force. So before meaningful things begin to happen, and like things like ordinances and whatnot, need to start at the beginning, I guess. So
But we can
that'll be in the next, I don't know, in the next month, we'll have a place on the agenda to do
Okay.
that and have them say, yes, go.
Great. And that'll come before we bring the cap in front of the
Yeah.
town council. So that's nice.
Yeah.
That's great.
And there is an action in the cap about the tree protection ordinance, so I'm be making sure that that's aligning with what is
Exactly.
desired and, you know, kind of what is in the works. Not that we need to back that action up, like that should be
No.
the forward-thinking
No.
action, but yeah, just calling that out. And I guess just to that point, just highlighting that that's one of the reasons why it's so important to have kind of the town management and council leadership kind of approval and input into this, procedural and roles and everything, so that we're really kind of hitting the ground running and we don't go off and spend energy, a lot of really great energy and work in a direction before we can move effectively forward. So thank you very much, Kristen.
Great. Exactly. All right. I think we've reached the end.
Move we adjourn?
Second. There's several seconds. All in favor? Done. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mandy.
All right, thank
Thanks, Dave.
you.
Thanks, Mandy.
We did it.
I know.
Yeah,
Sitting up here isn't bad.
I know, maybe it makes us
Yeah,
smarter,
I
right?
know.